Hey guys, what's up and welcome to this week's video. I'm aware I look really rough. I've probably worn this crew neck in a video before. It's laundry day, it's a Sunday, I didn't really feel like doing my makeup. You feel me? It's like gloomy out, it's cold. You get what I'm trying to say? Anyway, content's still here, so hey, what's up? If you're new here, hey, what's up? My name's Neha. Make sure you subscribe if you aren't already. I wanted to make this video because I recently was just helping a friend find an apartment in New York, and I figured I would share some of that advice with you guys in case you were looking to make the move to New York, if that was ever something that you wanted to do, if you know someone who is, or if you're just genuinely curious as to like how crazy it is living in New York, then this will be entertaining for you. I was just giving him a bunch of like tips and tricks that I learned, considering I just moved here like 4-ish months ago and he just moved like a couple weeks ago. So I was kind of giving him the like tips and stuff that I tried to do. And I found that a lot of the stuff that I was kind of figuring out wasn't always Googleable. This was kind of stuff you had to like find out from locals or friends, things of that nature. So without further ado, let's get into this video. So first and foremost, the obvious, it's expensive. There is no way to sugarcoat that. No matter where you live in New York, you're probably going to be paying a lot in rent. Now, granted, there are certain boroughs that are cheaper than others, and I'll get to that in another point, but it is expensive. And with that being said, you might have to get used to letting go of some of the amenities that you're used to having. Here's what I mean by that. So I'm originally from like the Philadelphia area. I grew up in the suburbs, but then I went to school in Philly. And in Philly, I mean, I wouldn't say the rent is significantly cheaper than New York City, but typically like dishwasher, a full kitchen, and like in-unit washer and dryer is usually standard. And in New York, that's not a standard that is in most apartments. In fact, you're kind of lucky if you can get all of those things. So the first thing I would say is if you're gonna move here, just keep a really open mindset, and I'd maybe have like top 5 things that you absolutely have to have in an apartment, and then a couple things that maybe you could, you know, live without. Because quite honestly, odds are, unless you're paying a ton for the apartment or you just get really lucky, you're probably going to have a place that doesn't have every single thing you want. So the place I live in, I'm really fortunate that I have a dishwasher and in-unit washer and dryer. That is unheard of in Manhattan, so I just want to like lay that out. But I have a 5th floor walk-up with no elevator, so that's kind of the catch. So I would just keep that in mind. Like if you're gonna make the move, kind of take the standards that you're used to having and, you know, really choose what you think is the most important. And again, that's just if you're like renting an apartment, if you have a ton of money or you can afford much nicer places. A lot of places will have these things, but believe it or not, there are places that are also really expensive that don't have things. And if you can even get a fraction of the things that you absolutely want to have, then you should get the apartment. The next thing, to even get an apartment here in New York, you will need to qualify for it. And so what they do is they typically have a minimum for a credit score check. That will vary place to place, but typically you need to make some sort of minimum for your credit score. And the second thing is you need to be making at least 40 times the monthly rent. For example, if your monthly rent is $1,000, you need to be making at least $40,000 annually to even qualify for the apartment. And that's also pretty standard amongst New York. I see that kind of in all these, in pretty much any apartment I've seen come up. Those are typically the 2 biggest things. If you don't qualify for one or the other, I think you can get a cosigner, but they need to be making 80 times the rent. So same thing, if it's $1,000, they need to be making at least $80,000. That's just one thing to kind of be aware of, is make sure you have a good enough credit score and that you are making more than enough to sort of cover the rent so you can even qualify for an apartment. So kind of what I mentioned before is to also know areas that are really good. Obviously, if you're coming from outside of the area, it's going to be kind of hard to tell. So certain areas obviously are cheaper than others, some are more expensive, and obviously it's all based on location. Knowing where the areas are, what the typical rent is, and also a big thing is I would look at how long it takes you to commute to your job. So for me personally, I was looking initially a lot in Brooklyn because I thought that that would be like the easiest, the cheapest, kind of more ideal for someone who's fresh out of college, I feel like everyone just moves to Brooklyn. Actually stayed at two of my really good friends' place in Brooklyn, and I spent the night at their place and then I commuted into work the next day. And so they live in Bushwick in Brooklyn and I work in Midtown West, and the train took like an hour. Like I had to take 2 trains, and the commute between Brooklyn, well, that part of Brooklyn into Midtown West took like an hour. And in my mind, I was like, that's just so not worth it to maybe have a couple $100s taken off of rent. Like not even a couple hundred, it's maybe like $200 cheaper than what I'm paying here. So it sounds like it's better, but like in the long term, like it would just be a pain every single day to commute if it would take an hour. So I would sort of start by looking at where it is that you're going to be working or spending a lot of your time, and then backtrack that way and see what is easiest to get to. Some of the really cool areas, obviously, like Williamsburg's a really hot spot in Brooklyn. It is really expensive though, so the rent there is kind of Manhattan rent. So that was another thing, like when I was looking at places, quite honestly, I thought Brooklyn would be cheaper, but it was maybe give or take $100 cheaper at best. And it was like, if that was going to be it, then I'd rather just live in Manhattan. Like why commute all the way if it was only going to save me $100? That was just me. That might be a lot to you, but in the long term, I think when you're doing something like a commute every single day, I feel like it would just get to be a lot. So I live on the Upper West Side, in case you guys were curious. I live right next to Central Park, which is really nice. This whole area is actually really residential. There's a lot of like families, but there's also a lot of young people. I live right near Columbia University. So it's a really nice kind of place, and it's a lot more quieter. It's kind of like the suburbs in the city. There's a lot of trees, a lot of families. It's way quieter, but there's also a lot of cool bars. If you kind of want to be around more of like the crazy liveliness, the Lower East Side or the East Village are really nice areas as well. That's kind of where everyone who's like 20 something sort of moves to. So those are just some ideas that I have. Of course, there's a ton of other places in New York that you could find. All of them vary in rent. But I would say for where I kind of know so far of like the 20 somethings, it's usually like in the Brooklyn area, it's usually like Williamsburg, East Williamsburg, Bushwick, and Bed-Stuy. Bushwick and Bed-Stuy are a little far, but they were probably also your best deals of rent. So if you can't really afford that much, they actually have like, they're redoing a bunch of new apartments and the rent really is not that bad. So do a lot of research about the areas and where you're going to be going and how you're going to be commuting. So my next point about also knowing where you're going to be, the biggest tip I have is to live next to multiple train lines. If you guys don't know, New York's obviously known for their subway system, and it's really good. It's very integrated and kind of allows you to get pretty much anywhere through the train, and that obviously is the main reason no one really needs a car in New York. You can kind of just get everywhere via train. At the same time though, anyone who tells you the MTA is reliable is literally lying to you. There are constantly like electrical changes, maintenance issues, weather will change it, like if there's flood warnings, things like that. My biggest recommendation is to live next to multiple train lines, because trust me, there is always a day that like a certain train line might be down, might be having maintenance work, might be running express only. They love to throw fun little curveballs like that, and the last thing you want is to like not be able to get home. And I haven't even been here for like snow yet, but apparently when the weather gets really bad, things get even worse. The next thing kind of comes down to when you sort of find an apartment. If you're looking and it says things like no finder's fee, or it doesn't say anything about a finder's fee, here's what that is. So apparently in like New York, because so many people rent here, what realtors start doing is for these really great apartments that are in like really amazing areas, they start charging this finder's fee for basically finding you the apartment, which, you know, obviously they've done their job and everything, but the thing is they can charge, I've heard, like 10% or 20% of like the annual rent of a place. So you might end up paying like 10 grand or 20 grand, like $20,000 for them to find you an apartment. I take it that most people are probably on a budget when you're moving here. Well, I wouldn't even say that's a budget. Like who the hell just like whips out like 20K to like find an apartment? Biggest tip is if it says anything about a finder's fee, then I wouldn't go down that path. So there are a lot of places that don't have finder's fees. I would recommend going with that, or anything that says no finder's fee, things like that. Going off of that also, if you see anything that says flex or like a flex bedroom, what that also means is like a lot of these really big apartment buildings have like really big living rooms, and since like rent is so expensive, instead of it being a 1-bedroom with a living room, it might be called a 2-bedroom flex. And so what that basically means is they put a wall in the living room and turn that into another bedroom, or they might turn it into 3 bedrooms. So there might not be a living room, it might just be like a 3-bedroom instead of a 1-bed 1-bath. It might be like a 3-bed 1-bath because they like split the living room into 2 bedrooms. Next biggest tip is you should always tour the places. I mean, there are people who still scam, or they could post pictures that just aren't true of the place. I mean, if anything looks too good to be true, I would always fact check that. So you will just want to make sure that you're actually signing a lease to a place that was promised to you, that looks right, that doesn't have anything weird going on with it. I'd always check out the place. And if you are going to tour places, I'd tour definitely more than one. Like I would come one day and just go boom, boom, boom. That's what I did. I literally came up for, I think, a Saturday, and I saw like 5 or 6 different places. And the reason I'd schedule at least like 5 or 6 is because odds are like you might want to see like 6 places but only 4 confirm, and then at the last minute you can only see 3 of them, and the last thing you want to do is make a trip all the way to New York to tour places and then only get to see like 1 apartment. So if that all helped you and you finally find a spot that is interesting or that you really like, lock it in ASAP. New York City is one of those places where it's like everyone and their mom is always looking for apartments. So you might have found a gem, but guess what? 10 other people probably also found the same gem, and it's only gonna go to 1 person. So if you really like the place, like send in your deposit, sign that lease so it's guaranteed to be yours. I know when I was telling my friend about this, he like found a place that he toured this place that he really liked, and then like the next day it was gone. So if you find a place that you really like, literally put whatever you need to do down on it, because places will go like this, especially if it's a really good find. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video with some, I guess, kind of useful tidbits if you do plan on moving to New York City at any time. I know that these are kind of things that I've discovered when I was going through the process, the things that I was telling my friend while he was going through the process. Obviously I'm still kind of new and I'm figuring it out, but those were just some of the things right off the bat that I didn't really see publicized as much online, and I figured these would be like some real truths to moving here. I hope that it helps you guys or anyone that you know who's moving. If you guys enjoyed this video, please make sure you give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you aren't already, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!